Welcome back, my dear listeners. Before we begin today's story, please show some love by subscribing to the channel and liking the video. Now then, let us begin. Karen Matthews. Now there is a name I will spend the remainder of my life trying to forget. I'm Roger Turner. I was married to Karen for 20 years. Like most clueless husbands, I thought we had a good marriage, until I discovered otherwise. Karen and I were two working-class kids from a council estate. We attended the same school, although we had different groups of friends. We were aware of each other but didn't start dating until a few years after we left school. At the time Karen was working as a legal secretary, I had just started my own business. My business was websites, in particular designing and hosting. The big money makers were two comparison sites I designed, one was for insurance, the other for price checking. When Karen and I got married, I was already worth a considerable amount of money. To protect my business, my lawyer suggested a prenuptial agreement. It stated that if the marriage broke down for whatever reason, Karen would get a percentage of my personal wealth. Thinking we would be together for life, I was happy to sign it. Karen signed it knowing that whatever happened, she would be rich. Although our careers were different, one place we were good was in bed. Karen was like an insatiable beast. All the way through our marriage, Karen almost fucked me to death 4 times a week, at least. Our eldest son was born 19 months after we got married. 4 years later, the twins were born. I was now the father of 3 boys. The only thing we disagreed on was names. For some reason, Karen wanted to use names that had a biblical reference. As we were not religious, I didn't see the point. We agreed on Robert for the oldest child. 4 years later, the twins were named Ethan and Luke. Despite both of us working, we always made time at the weekend to spend together as a family. We had a nice family home in a well-to-do area. Most of our neighbors were businessmen and a few minor celebrities. We were constantly being invited to a party or business function. Many times we declined the invitation to spend time with the kids. My business had grown to the extent that I now employed 40 staff. Don Healy was my COO and second in charge. The rest of the staff were either tech guys or finance staff. As any employer knows these days, good staff are hard to find, even harder to keep. For that reason, I was always looking for incentives to keep my staff. Every year on their birthday, I gave them the day off with pay, plus I paid for a meal for the staff member and spouse or partner. I decided to offer all staff a private healthcare package. The advantage of this was they could get urgent treatment rather than join an NHS waiting list. As the package included immediate family, most of the staff appreciated the gesture. Part of the medical package was a health check every 2 years. My 45th birthday was a month away when I received the invitation for a health check. Thinking I would set a good example to my staff, I accepted it. The doctor asked me several questions about my lifestyle. Did I smoke? Did I drink? The usual stuff you would expect to get asked. He did all the usual checks such as height, weight, and blood pressure. To complete the tests, I was asked to give a blood and urine sample. The doctor explained they would run tests. If there were any issues, I would be contacted. I returned to work happy in the knowledge that I appeared to be fit and healthy. That evening, Karen and I spoke about Robert's upcoming 18th birthday. We agreed to throw a party for him. After some deliberation, we settled on a venue. Both of us said we didn't want drunken 18-year-olds wandering about our house. 2 days before the party, I got the news that turned my life upside down. The doctor wanted to speak to me about the results of my tests. Is it bad news, Doc? I asked as I sat where the doctor indicated. It's not life-threatening, Mr. Turner. The problem is you appear to have hemochromatosis. As you live a relatively healthy lifestyle, you are not showing any of the obvious symptoms. With some medication, we can help control the disease. Any idea how I caught it? I asked. I'm afraid it's hereditary, Mr. Turner. The symptoms differ between each known case. Some men suffer with chronic internal pain, others live pain-free but are sterile. You fall into the latter group. Hereditary. I had better get my sons checked out. Doc, did you just say I was sterile? Yes, Mr. Turner. The results of the tests show you are sterile. From our experience, I would say you always have been. I could tell by the look on his face what he was thinking. The doctor explained to me about the medication he was prescribing. Thankfully, he gave me several leaflets to read through, still shocked I didn't hear too much of what he said to me. I had planned to return to the office for the rest of the day, instead I headed for home. With Karen at work and the boys at school, I had time to think. After I stopped feeling sorry for myself, I made appointments for the boys to be tested urgently. If they were not my sons, I wanted answers from my wife. During dinner that night, I explained what I had learned earlier today. The boys were okay about being tested. Karen wasn't as enthusiastic, considering the boys' health was the main concern. I couldn't understand her attitude. Regardless of how Karen felt, I took the boys to be tested 2 days after the party. It was an agonizing few days waiting for the results. My emotions were mixed when I got the results. "Please sit down, Mr. Turner," the doctor indicated to a chair. "Oh, what's wrong with me?" I asked, knowing the boys were clear. "We thought it strange that after extensive tests, none of your sons showed any signs of hemochromatosis. As we still had your samples, I asked the lab to do a DNA test. I hope you don't mind. I did see your concern at our last meeting." I looked at the doctor knowing it was going to be bad news. "I'm afraid the tests concluded that you are not the biological father of your sons." I jumped up claiming the test results were wrong. The doctor let me rant for a few minutes before I calmed down and sat down again. "Do the boys all have the same father?" I asked. "Yes. The tests confirmed the same man fathered all 3 boys. As you were unaware of your condition, I assume your wife was also unaware?" My wife didn't know. She still doesn't know the full story. I told her about the health issues. At the time, I didn't mention me being sterile. I clung to some hope that the boys would be mine. "I'm sorry, Mr. Turner." I nodded my head. "Can you get me a printed copy of the DNA results, please? I have a feeling I am going to need them quite soon." I thanked the doctor and left. Normally, I might have considered going home, but today I chose to go back to the office. As soon as I walked into the office, Don knew something was wrong. He followed me into my office and closed the door. "What's up, Roger? You look like death." "I just got some bad news, Don." I sat and explained everything to Don. "Jesus Christ, Roger. What are you going to do about it?" Don asked. "The way I see it, I have 2 options. I can say nothing and carry on playing the dumb, clueless husband, or I can confront Karen. The latter will probably lead to a divorce." I replied. 20 years. 20 bloody years I have been living a lie. All this time I thought the boys were mine. "Calm down, Roger. I'm sure there is an explanation for this." "Oh, I'm sure there is, Don. Maybe Karen can fucking explain it to me tonight. I'll be leaving you in charge for a few days. I need to sort this mess out." "I'm sorry, Roger. Take as long as you need. I'll contact you if anything crops up that I can't deal with." Don returned to his office. I sat there thinking about how to deal with the mess. Mentally, I worked out Karen stood to get about £2 million if we divorced. Considering I was worth 10 times that amount, I could afford it. I called my lawyer for advice. As he mostly dealt with corporate clients, he recommended Arthur Crenshaw. Arthur Crenshaw was an old-school lawyer. He knew his way around the legal system. I explained about the prenuptial agreement we had in place. "Are you sure this is what you want to do, Mr. Turner?" "Yes. There is nothing my wife can say to me that will make this right. Can I collect the papers when they are ready?" "Of course. I am in court tomorrow. My secretary Marion will have them for you to collect." I thanked Arthur and left. I drove around until it was time for me to go home. When I walked indoors, the twins were watching television. Karen was cooking dinner. "Where's Robert?" I asked. "Staying out with friends for the night. It's just the 4 of us for dinner tonight," Karen replied with a smile. I wondered if she would be smiling later after our little chat. The twins disappeared to their rooms after dinner. With the dishwasher loaded, I joined Karen in the lounge. "I had an interesting chat with the doctor yesterday." "Really? What about?" Karen replied calmly. "It was about how the boys have no signs of the hereditary condition that I have. After running all the tests, they drew a blank, which apparently is very unusual. They solved the riddle when the doctor ran a DNA test. the boy's DNA is no match to mine. I wondered if you would care to explain? Karen sat silently and stared at me for a minute. There's not much to say, the boys are not yours. I fell in love with someone else soon after we married. My love was that strong, I wanted his children. When we were trying for a baby, I used my diaphragm, unless I made love with him. Karen replied with almost no emotion. If you fell in love with someone else, why not divorce me and go play happy families with him? Because he was already married with children. Now we know that you are sterile. It seems like I made the right decision. If not, we would never have been parents. I don't believe I am hearing this. You got pregnant by another man because you fell in love with him. That means for 20 years we have been living a lie. I still love you, Roger. I just loved this other person more. Clearly, otherwise you wouldn't have had his kids. I am going out for a while. I cannot stand to be around you right now. I'll sleep in the spare room tonight. I stormed out and raced away from the house. After several drinks in a pub, I returned home. Karen was sitting watching television. I ignored her and headed off to the spare room. I pretended to be asleep when she knocked on the door about 30 minutes later. In the morning I showered and dressed. I left the house without uttering a word. Karen sent me a text message a while later. Are you okay? What do you think? Was my reply. Karen didn't reply. I checked in with Dawn, then I spent the morning looking for a house to purchase. Later in the day I collected the divorce papers. Karen was alone when I arrived at the house. She smiled as I walked indoors. Where are the boys? I asked tersely. Robert is out again. The twins are with my parents. As we need to talk, I thought it best if the boys were not here. I'm glad to see you assumed I would be coming home. I am not sure what you think we have to talk about. I'll go upstairs and get changed. Whilst I do that, you can take a look at these. I tossed the envelope on the kitchen table before walking away. Karen stood there with her arms folded, a defiant look on her face when I returned to the kitchen. Really, Roger, a divorce? Yes, Karen, a divorce. You told me last night that you loved another man more than you loved me. You loved him so much you even had his fucking kids. But I still love you, Roger. You're right, just not enough to have my kids. The fact I am sterile makes no difference. If we had known back then, we could have adopted. You went off and got pregnant by this bastard without giving me any say in the matter. For all I know, you are still fucking him. A divorce is the only option for me, Karen. As you can see, I have been fair. You get £2 million as per the prenup agreement. When I mentioned Karen still fucking him, she looked at the floor. That told me all I needed to know. This is my house, Karen. That means you get to move out. Find somewhere and I'll pay for it. We can deduct it from your £2 million settlement. In the meantime, I'll stay in a hotel. What about child support? Karen practically screamed. As Robert is over 18, it's irrelevant. If you want child support for the twins, ask their father, whoever he may be. You're making a big mistake, Roger. You are listed as the boy's father, therefore you have to pay for them. I made a mistake. I married you, Karen. Just out of interest, who is the boy's father? I am not saying it won't make any difference anyway. You will still go for the divorce. I went back upstairs to pack my clothes. I was going to stay in a hotel for a few nights until I sorted something out. Karen was sitting at the table crying when I carried the suitcases downstairs. I'll be back for some more of my stuff in a day or two. I have enough for a few days. I called out without waiting for a reply. I found an apartment I could rent for 2 months. Hopefully that was all I would need it for. It also gave Karen a chance to find somewhere to live. Karen called me several times asking me to reconsider. After the last call that got heated, she gave up. My lawyer said she had signed and returned the divorce papers. I gave her a month to vacate the house. Robert called to let me know he wasn't happy with his mother. He asked if he could move in with me when I found somewhere. I told Robert that his mother would be moving out of the house. When I called to speak to Ethan and Luke, I was told they didn't want to talk to me. I heard Luke scream out that he hated me. One evening, Robert and I were talking when Karen called him. He put the call on the loudspeaker. Yes. What do you want? Robert said tersely. Robert, do not speak to me like that. I am your mother, show me some respect. Respect? That's a fucking laugh. Robert stopped and stared at the phone. You brought this on yourself, you destroyed this family. I want nothing to do with you or the sperm donor you refer to as my father. Stay away from me and do not call me again. You're nothing more than an evil witch. Robert hit the button to end the call. You should try and maintain some sort of relationship with your mother, I advised. She can go to hell, Dad. I want nothing to do with her. Hopefully the twins will realize what an evil person she is and walk away when they are old enough. Karen found a house for her and the twins. She kept a room for Robert, not that he was going to use it. I was there the day she moved out. Take the bed, Karen, I'll get a new one. We never did anything in the house. I don't believe a word you say, so take the bed. The twins ignored me the whole time we were at the house. They didn't look back when Karen drove away. Due to my wealth and status as a normal kid who did very well for himself, the papers followed the story of the divorce. Public opinion appeared to be on my side. Most people felt I had been treated badly by Karen. 5 months later, the divorce was final. Sadly, I got stuck with child support for the twins. Roger, it's Arthur. Just calling to let you know you are a single man. The divorce was final today. Thanks, Arthur. I have a few questions for you. Can I challenge the child support claim, and can I get my name removed from the boys' birth certificates? You can appeal against the child support claim, although it might take some time. The real father would have to take a paternity test before anything happens. He will probably try and avoid the test at all costs. There is another way. It will cost a little more, but the result will happen faster. What's the alternative option? I asked. You can sue your ex-wife for parental fraud. It would mean you get taken off the birth certificates, and you will be able to claim back any child support you have paid since the divorce. If I get her on the stand, I will ask her to name the father. She cannot refuse to answer if she's under oath. That way you can sue him for backdated child support. Go for it, Arthur. Get the papers drawn up and served, please. Will do, Roger. I will let you know when Karen has been served with them. 3 days later, I was informed Karen had been served with the papers for parental fraud. I expected to get a call from Karen. Her silence worried me somewhat. Arthur called me to say Karen's lawyer wanted to set up a meeting. I told him to let them know I wasn't interested and would see them in court. On the day of the hearing, I sat with Arthur. Karen was sitting with her lawyer. She had a worried look on her face. I assumed her lawyer was someone from the law firm that employed her. The hearing started with me explaining why I was suing Karen. I faced questions from Karen's lawyer as well as Arthur. The afternoon saw Karen face the lawyers. Her lawyer went easy on her. Arthur wasn't so forgiving. Miss Matthews, your ex-husband is suing you for parental fraud. You admitted in your recent divorce hearing that my client was not the father of your 3 sons. My client wants his name removed from the birth certificates and replaced with the biological father's name. Would you mind telling us who the real father is? Karen sat quietly staring at the floor. I can't. It would destroy his family and ruin his life, Karen replied. Just like you ruined mine, I thought to myself. The judge's voice brought me back to reality. Miss Matthews, may I remind you that you are under oath? Please answer the question. Karen sat and stared straight ahead. She answered in a quiet voice, almost a whisper. Speak up, Miss Matthews. The judge admonished Karen. Lawrence Rosenthal. Karen replied, then returned to staring at the floor. A young woman stood up behind me and left the court. Arthur spoke to the judge. Your Honor, Miss Matthews has named the biological father of her children. All my client wants is his name removed from the birth certificates. Arthur returned to sit beside me. The judge looked down at some paperwork. It is my decision that Miss Matthews deceived her former husband into believing he was the father of 3 children, when this was clearly not the case. Miss Matthews, I am going to sentence you to 6 months in prison, suspended for 2 years. If you appear in court for any offense, the 6 months will be added to any sentence given. Do you understand? Karen answered with a yes. Turning to me, the judge spoke. Mr. Turner, it is the decision of this court that your name will be removed from the birth certificates of Miss Matthews' children. As it has been proven that you are not the father, I will relieve you from any financial obligations with regard to child support. Thank you, Your Honor, I replied. We stood as the judge left the courtroom. Arthur gathered his papers and we left the court. Karen approached us in the foyer. I hope you are satisfied, Roger. You have probably ruined a man's life, not to mention destroyed his marriage. With your wealth you could have afforded a few more years of child support. If you will excuse me, I need to speak to Larry and let him know what happened. I hope I never see or speak to you again, Roger. Arthur spoke up. Miss Matthews, I don't know what you intend to say to Mr. Rosenthal. I feel it only fair to warn you that he was served papers for back payment of child support about 10 minutes ago. Good afternoon. Arthur and I walked away, leaving Karen crying. How did you get Rosenthal served so quickly? I asked Arthur. Marion had the papers ready, all we needed was his name. When Karen said who it was, an assistant of mine left the court to call Marion. She printed the papers off and passed them to a waiting process server. Mr. Rosenthal was served before the hearing ended. Arthur smiled. Epilogue, the process server told me that Rosenthal collapsed when he opened the envelope. He was taken away in an ambulance as Karen entered the office. As with my divorce, the papers were all over the case. Larry Rosenthal would be a celebrity in his own right when the next day's editions hit the stores. It was through the media that I learned what happened. When the senior partners found out what caused Rosenthal to collapse, they added to his woes and fired him. His relationship with Karen was against company policy. Karen was also dismissed. My case against Rosenthal was dead in the water. His wife cleared him out in a messy divorce. The court placed a note on his record that he owed me £450,000. I didn't expect to see a penny of it. Money wasn't the issue for me, I just wanted to destroy his life, as he had destroyed mine. True to her word, Karen hasn't spoken to me since the day in court. Larry moved in with Karen when his wife kicked him out. As far as I know, they are still together. Robert lives with me. He still refuses to acknowledge his mother and biological father. I now divide my time between my business and my friends. I have a few friends with benefits. None of them are serious, as I do not intend to get married again. 20 years of living a lie was more than enough for me, and that's a wrap for today's story. Thanks for hanging out with us here today. To catch more awesome narrations, hit that subscribe button, drop a thumbs up, and comment your favorite part. And hey, don't forget to hit that notification bell to be the first to know when we drop the next story.